Hello everyone, welcome back to Mortons on the Move, and today we're going to be talking about tire safety and reliability on RVs. Now, a lot of people think of inflation when it comes to tire safety, and that is absolutely critical, but there's a lot of other things to consider when you're talking about big, heavy RVs, like weights and temperature and the speed of the tires and more. Now, we're going to be talking about our big coach behind us today, but these principles are going to apply to towable RVs and the vehicles towing them as well. How are RV tires different from passenger car tires, and why do these things kind of matter? There's actually not as much different as there is similar. Tires are tires. Most of the time these days they're built as radial tires. The biggest difference with RV tires is the sheer amount of weight that they carry. In your car, most of the time, the tires are way overrated for the weight that they're carrying. And if they do get overloaded because you packed way too many people and stuff in the car, it's usually for a very short period of time. And a catastrophic incident, a blowout or a flat in a car, a lot of times just isn't that catastrophic. You come to the side of the road and you change the tire. In an RV, a blowout or a flat can cause so much more damage or be so much more catastrophic because of the weight, size, and dynamics of how these vehicles move. So it's just so much more important to try and avoid these things in RV tires. Now, weight is the biggest factor that we really need to consider with RV tires. All tires have a load index or a weight rating. Now, if we look at the sidewall of a tire, you're going to see these random numbers here. The first numbers are the aspect ratio. Not really that critical to know. As long as you're putting the right size tire on your RV, like for like, you're going to be okay. And then you're going to see R with a number here. This number means the radius of the rim. This is an R22.5, which means this rim is 22.5 inches tall, a standard size for big trucks and big RVs. Then after it, you're going to see this number here, and this is the load index. Now, the load index, you can look up and find out what this tire can actually carry. You don't really have to look that up though, because almost all tires have a little tiny thing on the sidewall somewhere in here that says what the max load of the tire is. This is critical to know with RV tires. This tire specifically says the max load is 7,830 pounds, single, which means single tire. So this tire is mounted on a single axle. It only has one tire. These tires over here are mounted dual, and the dual tires actually have a lower rating. So over here, we can actually look at it, says 6,940 pounds, significantly lower when mounted in dual. The reason that you need to know that is because you need to make sure that you are not overloading your tires. It's very easy to overload tires in an RV because we add so much stuff to the RV when we go on a trip. In theory, the tires should be well rated to carry the weight on the axle, but a lot of times people get close to that or sometimes even overload it. So when you put tires on, you're gonna have weight rating options. While you can choose like the lowest option available, we typically recommend that you pick kind of the next size up so that you're over rating the tires for the axle, just because weights change so much in an RV. You put 1,000 pounds of water in it, or you load it up with stuff, and it's just harder for us all to know that we are within the weights ratings. It's almost more important on smaller RVs like travel trailers. A lot of times they come with tires that are just barely rated for the weight. And this weight is at maximum pressure. A lot of times you don't have what's called the pressure inflation chart. The higher the pressure, the closer you're going to get to the maximum carrying capacity of the tire. But as you drop pressure, this tire can't carry as much before it's going to have a catastrophic problem. In big tires like this, you can look at charts and find out what the pressure you need to run at to carry the weight that's actually on the tire. And it's usually better to run a lower pressure just for the comfort of the ride, because the more inflated the tire, the harder it is and the stiffer the ride. But with lower inflation, we can have a softer ride in the coach. Now, if you find that and you know your weights, you can take your RV to a scale and actually weigh it, then you can set your tires based on those tables. But if you don't know your weights, usually we recommend inflating to the max pressure. And that is going to make this tire carry this maximum load that it is specifically stating. On our fifth wheel, we ran G rated tires. G and H are higher rated for the load that most of those types of rigs will carry, and they're becoming more and more common because the rigs are heavier and heavier. On travel trailer tires, a lot of times those are actually like truck tires or trailer tires that the weights might not be specifically stated as a trailer tire. So it's really critical that you actually look at the weights and make sure that you are putting a tire on that can handle the weight of the axle that it's on. The next thing we're going to talk about that most people don't think about with RV tires is the speed. Many times tires on RVs are not rated to go near as fast as car tires, passenger vehicle tires. When we looked at the information that said the size of the tire, and then over here we see the load index. At the end of the load index, there's going to be a letter. The letter on this tire is M. If you go look at your car, it's going to be something like a Y or a higher letter. That letter indicates how fast this tire is rated to run. If you exceed that, the sheer pressure in this big tire that's designed more for weight than speed could actually cause damage. I happen to know that a letter M is 81 miles per hour. These tires aren't rated to run any more than 81 miles per hour, or they could sustain damage. Some tires run even slower than that, down to 65 or so. It's really important that you make sure you know this letter and then go to a chart online to make sure you know what the speed is so that you do not run too fast with your RV tires, because that is a really easy way to destroy a set of tires very quickly. You might not even see the damage. It could break cords inside the tire, and then you're just driving along and boom, you have a catastrophic blowout. Don't exceed the speed rating of your RV tires. The next piece to everything is temperature. Weight and speed will cause the tire to heat up. The higher the weight on the tire and the faster it goes, the hotter this tire will get, because as it goes down, this bulge down here is moving around and that rubber is shifting back and forth lots and lots of times per second, and it makes this rubber get hot. And a hotter day, the hotter the tires are going to get. When it's running on that hot and black asphalt and it's in the sun on this side, these tires can get very hot. And it's critical that the tires don't get too hot, because then the rubber starts to break down. The critical temperature for most tires on the rubber itself, I like to think of around 170 degrees. Now that seems really hot, but it is possible for these tires to get there, especially if you're out in the desert on a 100-degree day cruising down the highway. These tires could get that hot, and it's critical that they don't get too hot for too long. Running at a higher pressure and making sure you're not overloaded, the tire should stay within its temperature rating. However, it's always good to check them every so often, particularly if it's really hot outside. We like to use a basic infrared temperature gun. You can get these pretty cheap. I think this one cost me Centec. It's a Harbor Freight version. It was probably $15, although I got this maybe 10 years ago. All you do is it's got a little laser that you just shoot it at the tire and it gives us a reading. The tire is 73 degrees. Knowing what the temperature of the tire is when you come to a stop at a rest stop or something after running for a while is just helpful to know if you need to slow down or if your tires are just getting too hot. If they're not rated for the load or there's something else wrong, you might see that in temperature. Shoot all your different tires. If you see one that is way hotter than the rest of them, something's wrong there. Check the pressure. Check to make sure that you're not overloaded on that part of the axle. Temperature is critical. If you overheat the tires, high probability of failure. Okay, now that we've talked about all these things that aren't inflation, let's talk about inflation. Inflation is absolutely critical, and I know it can be a pain in the butt, and that's why we actually highly recommend the Viair air compressors. They have very high volume and they can inflate these giant tires faster than a lot of other options. We have the capability to inflate these tires right off the air systems in the engine in this coach, but I still almost always opt for using this compressor because it's almost just as good. We've had this compressor, it's traveled from Mexico to the Arctic Ocean with us and has been absolutely fantastic. Making sure that your tires are properly inflated is important. Having a compressor on board is absolutely critical as well. When it comes to air compressors for RV tires, it's important that the compressor can reach the pressures that you need, but not only the pressures, the volume, because when you start to get those really high pressures, a lot of compressors will say they can reach 200 PSI, but can they reach that at a reasonable CFM, which is the flow rate? The Viair compressors are really designed for that, and they do an excellent job of it. This is the 400p RV unit, which also means it has a duty cycle of about 33%. This compressor can run for 40 minutes continuously at a very high flow rate before it needs to stop and cool. A lot of people don't think about the duty cycle of these compressors as well. If you run them too much, they will burn out. I believe they make a 450p that can run continuously, but for the most part, 40 minutes is usually more than enough to get the tires topped off. So really important that you get a good air compressor that's gonna hold up to inflating these big tires. It's way more work than inflating tires on a passenger vehicle. These tires inflate to 120 PSI max. So that takes a lot of pressure and a lot of air to get there. So how do we know what the pressure is in the tire? Well, you can actually go around and hook up a tire pressure gauge to each tire. We always recommend using these tire extensions if you're running dually tires, because it's so much easier to actually check the pressure. But we recommend anybody with an RV have a tire pressure monitoring system on their tires, because as you're going down the road, if something does go wrong and you start to get a leak, you're going to overload that tire very quickly. It's going to bend too much, it's going to overheat, and it could catastrophically fail. The best way to know that that's happening is by actually having a live piece of information come back to you inside the RV. And that is done either with a sensor that's installed inside the rim, or you can actually get sensors that just hook up to the outside of the tire here. And this is called a tire pressure monitoring system. And this little sensor right here is a transponder that reads the tire pressure and sends it back to a screen inside the RV. Now, the one that we recommend is the TST Tire truck safety systems, something like that. Mobile Must Have actually sells this product as well. We've used a number of different tire monitors over the years. This has been a really reliable product that's really designed for truckers and works incredibly well. Setting this system up, really simple. It transmits the data back. Always have that on when you're driving the RV, and just kind of keep an eye on the tire pressures, but also set alarms so that if it goes down, 10 PSI or so, it alarms and it lets you know there's something going on with X tire. Very, very, very helpful, and can get you to pull over before you have a catastrophic blowout. Incredibly simple system. Screw this onto the valve, set it up to read back to the monitor, and it's easy as that. These have batteries in them. You do occasionally have to change the batteries, although we've run them for 5 years, haven't had to change the batteries yet. So they go a very, very long time. You can have sensors on every tire on the vehicle as well. We have 12 tires total between the coach and our towed vehicle behind it. And we have sensors on all of them. So we can look at all the pressures, including the vehicle behind us, to know that we are not having any issues with the tires. Now, with a vehicle as long as this, we do have a repeater that's installed in the very back of the RV. It's a really simple thing that just hooks up to power, and it takes the signal from these, rebroadcasts it to send it all the way up to the front, because it's a really long way from the very back of the car all the way up to the front. But we have tire monitoring on every single tire, and we can switch these out. Just take it off, put it on. So if we're towing a different vehicle or a different trailer, we can easily put them on whatever's behind the RV, and it'll just transmit that same data back up front. So you make sure that you're not inflated. It's also really interesting to watch those tire pressures. It's perfectly normal to see the tire pressures increase upwards of 20 PSI once you start rolling, because as these tires get warm, the pressure increases. The sidewall pressure ratings on these tires is cold. So if it says to inflate to 120 PSI, actually these are 125 PSI to reach that 7,800 pound capacity on this tire, that needs to be inflated when it's cold. If it's hot, you can inflate it a little bit more than that. If you do inflate it to the cold pressure when it's hot, that's okay for driving if you did have a leak or something. But the next time the tire cools down to ambient, 72 right now, make sure it's inflated back to that pressure to meet that maximum load rating pressure. Elevation can also change your tire pressure. There's so many different things that can affect tire pressures, and if you really want to pick the absolute best tire pressure, so like we were talking about earlier, running a lower pressure on these big tires, if you want to know your tire pressure to pick the right one, our friends the RV Geeks actually wrote a whole book about this, and I believe you can go get that on their website. I'm sure if you just search tire pressure over on their website, you'll find it. And it's a really, really great resource if you want to choose the correct tire pressure. We'll put a link in the description below for sure on that. All right, I've rambled a lot here already, but there's more. One of the big things we have to consider with tires is their age. A tire like this is designed for a bus, and it's typically gonna go 60 to 100,000 miles, and we're not gonna drive that much with this coach. So this tire is going to last its entire life, and then we're gonna have to age it out, actually replace it before the tread is gone. I mean, the tread's like an inch deep on this tire. So this tire is gonna age out, and it's important to replace these tires about 7 to 8 years is kind of what we shoot for a replacement. Some people go as long as 10 years. I'm gonna say that's kind of up to you. And the manufacturer a lot of times will recommend a replacement cycle. Sometimes they do recommend 10 years. And if you can get 10 years out of it, that's great. But you need to know when the tire was manufactured. And 8 years from that date is when you should consider replacing the tire. Tires break down over time, just being out in the weather and the sun. We do recommend covering the tires if they're just sitting there, because the sun can actually cause damage to them. But what you're gonna do is you wanna find the date code on the tire. Now, it must be on the inside of this tire, but the date code is a little bubble that shows the week and the year that the tire was manufactured. I happen to know these tires were manufactured, here we go, 3020. This was manufactured the 30th week of 2020. As this is now 2024, that's 2.5 years old on the tire. So we got quite a ways to go on these particular tires. One thing you can do to help a tire last longer is actually to drive it. Tires that sit too long, the rubber oils can actually kind of dry out, and they come out of the rubber. They can also develop flat spots from sitting too long. Driving is actually good for tires. As that flexing can move the rubber, it can actually get the oils to move around in those rubbers, and it can help the rubber last longer. So driving is really the best thing you can do for tires, aside from covering them as well and keeping the sun off of them. The last thing I want to talk about with regard to making sure your tires are in the best condition possible is just checking them regularly. Look over the tires. Don't go months and months without really inspecting the tires for damage. Things happen that you might not know happen. So right here, you can see this scuff mark. We curbed this tire. That means that we ran over it and it kind of slid off. Now, a lot of times that's okay with these tires. They're designed for that. But if this were to develop a bulge right here, or have a big chunk of the tire missing or something, you want to catch that. You don't want to run on that for too long, because that could really cause a catastrophic blowout. We have caught these types of issues before and repaired or replaced the tires that could have caused us significant issues down the road. So it's really important to just check over the tire, make sure you're good. And also, if you do get a puncture or something stuck in the tire, make sure that it is repaired appropriately. You can do a temporary repair where you just plug it yourself, but a tire repair shop should be able to really look at that tire and say, yes, this is repairable, or no, it's not. It's really important to do repairs properly, or else you could have a catastrophic issue down the road. Another thing to consider is when you replace the tires, also replace the valve stems. The valve stems have rubber in them as well, and that can dry out and fail just like the tires. We learned this the hard way. We replaced all our tires, but I didn't replace the valve stems. And a year after I put brand new tires on, all the valve stems started leaking like crazy. And that was because the rubber inside the valve stems had failed themselves. And then it was a whole process to take them off and replace them. Make sure you replace your valve stems when you replace your tires. Make sure you have tire pressure monitoring. Make sure you check for all the issues around the tires. And doing these things, you should have pretty reliable luck with tires on the road. It's really not that hard. It's just kind of knowing all these things and making sure that you keep them in mind. You should have a good, safe trip. One thing I do want to talk about is the front tires on motorhomes real quick. Let's head up to the front of this coach. So on the front of a motorhome, pretty much all the same stuff applies. However, because of the way motorhomes drive. They carry so much more weight on the front, and it's only one single tire. It's even more critical that you inspect these front tires for wear, damage, and make sure that the inflation is correct. If this tire were to overheat and blow out, it has a much higher probability of causing a catastrophic accident or rollover with the coach because of the way how much weight there is and the way these things actually handle it. Now, there are a couple things that you can do to mitigate a blowout on the front of a coach. There is a band that you can have installed on the rim itself that just makes this rim stronger, so that if you did collapse the tire and it slammed onto the rim, it might not collapse the rim and cause even more of a catastrophic accident. There's also some run flat type things that you can install in here. They're big rubber bands that actually go in here and they connect together, and if this tire were to deflate, it slams down onto that rubber and sits on the rim, and that actually can allow you to control the coach a little bit more. Most buses and big coaches don't have these products on there though. While the potential for an accident is very high, just trying to avoid it the best you can is one of the most important things. So really looking at these tires, looking for wear, looking for damage, making sure they're properly inflated is the most important thing that you can do on really the front of any vehicle. The front tires are going to be so much more likely to cause an accident than the rear tires if you were to have a blowout on pretty much any vehicle. So your front tires are absolutely the most critical. Get out, look at them every single time you stop after a trip. The last thing I want to talk about is actually tire rotation. If you see unusual wear, you can rotate RV tires. Trailers particularly, not really that big a deal. Sometimes the axles are a little misaligned. If you see serious wear, then you probably have an axle alignment problem that you need to correct. If you have slight wear, you can swap the tires around to try to improve the wear patterns. We did this on our fifth wheel a lot. On motor coaches, a lot of times, because the tires last so long, unless there is a significant wear issue, people don't really rotate them. Sometimes you'll get into a pattern of a different tire change pattern though, where you replace, say this coach has a tag axle on the back. These front tires could go to the tag axle, and then we could get new front tires at a slightly different change interval than the primary drive tires. There's lots of different things you can consider. We have an article over on our website all about rotating dualies on dually trucks and how those should move around. I guess I'm gonna say rotation can be important, but really watch your wear pattern. Look over the top of the tire and see how it's wearing. On this coach, all of our tires have worn very evenly, so we really have no plan to rotate these tires until we need to replace them. All right, I know that was a lot of information, but it actually is just kind of a matter of just keeping up with this stuff and just sort of knowing it. Tire blowouts are one of the most common problems with RVs and cause the most damage. We actually saw an RV that the entire inside of the RV got ripped out because of a tire blowout. Keeping these things in mind and just making sure that you're aware of all these different things can really decrease your chance of a blowout. Also, tire pressuring monitoring system, highly recommended. We ran for a couple years without it, and once we got one, it was just a game changer. It makes all of this so much easier, because you really should check your tire pressure every time you hit the road, because if one of them is off, that could be game over. That will overheat the tire and can cause a blowout. All right, so I hope these things help you stay safe on the road. As always, thank you so much for watching our content. I hope that you head over to mortonsonthemove.com, our website. Type in tire if you have any questions about this stuff. Lots more information about all these things over there. We're also gonna put some links in the description below for all these different product recommendations and some of the articles on our website. We'd love for you to subscribe. Give us your email over on our website, and we'll send you all of our updated content, as well as our Sunday Morton Post, which includes an RV comic. We just love our subscribers, and we'd love for you to be part of our community. As always, thank you so much. Stay safe. See you down the road.